podcast from Peach 2020, hosted by Peter Martin.
Hello, I'm Peter Martin, founder of Peach 2020, the international network for senior executives, entrepreneurs and influencers from across the hospitality sector. Welcome to our new series of Startup Hub podcasts, which will see me over the weeks in conversation with some of the up-and-coming stars in the out-of-home food and drink market, the creators of some of the best new and also well-established restaurant and bar concepts, the entrepreneurs driving the market forward, and those providing inspiration, picking up on the issues they face as they grow. These Startup Hub podcasts are sponsored by international law firm Bird & Bird and hospitality tech specialist Zonal. Now, one of the aspects that has made restaurants and bars such an exciting market in recent times has been its ability to attract entrepreneurs, bringing new ideas and fresh thinking to keep the established players on their toes. My guest for this podcast has helped launch not one, but two great concepts that have made their mark on the bar restaurant sector, bringing new flavours and certainly no shortage of fun. First, with his business partner Eren Ali, he brought us Las Iguanas. More recently, he launched Turtle Bay, a brand that continues to grow. So I'm delighted to have with me the celebrated serial entrepreneur, Ajith Jayawickrema. Welcome to Startup Hub. Aj, I want to start by sort of focusing really what it means to be an entrepreneur in the current climate. I mean, how are you facing up to the challenges of 2022?
On a personal level, I'm facing up to them really well because Turtle Bay is doing incredibly well. It's up on 2019 figures, post-pandemic period. It's come to its own and it's resonating with the sort of a new audience who've been in lockdown for 2 years. And we think it's a sort of future of hospitality where food and drink is very well mixed within the establishment. So I'm quite optimistic about the future.
I mean, it's interesting for you as an entrepreneur. Does that put you in a better position? Because by definition, you've been through some hard times, even launching brands, whether it was when you were launching Las Iguanas or more recently Turtle Bay. I mean, does that give you a certain resilience, or perhaps that gives you an advantage over others, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think entrepreneurs by nature are multitaskers. I think we're able to turn our hands to lots of different things. And often people like me probably thrive in a downturn and a crisis because it is what we're probably built for. And startup at any level is really hard work. I was watching something Elon Musk said recently. He said startup is a bit like eating glass and watching your reflection in a mirror. Didn't quite get it, but I think what he's trying to say is it's not an easy task doing any kind of startup. And but some of us just love it really at every level.
So, I mean, if you cast your mind back then, let's get a bit of the history of your career. Tell us a bit about how you and Eren actually created Las Iguanas, because it is an iconic brand out there, and it still continues to have a place and a role in the market.
It was actually Eren and I went to school together, but in the late 90s recession, I was being made redundant. I was sitting in Beckenham Park applying for jobs on Evening Standard. Then I thought, actually, I'd like to do something different for myself. So I started a business plan for a restaurant and went and saw Eren, who happened to be, my school chum in Bristol, and discussed it with him. And eventually, Las Iguanas was born, really. And Eren joined the business after, I think, 4 or 5 years, because he carried on working because the business startup Las Iguanas couldn't afford to support both of us. So it was that's the level of planning we
Yeah.
did do. It wasn't a great big business plan or anything, but we had an idea that we wanted to grow our business, and we want to make it, as successful as we could. But that was the crux of the startup, really. It wasn't too much debate. Failure wasn't considered, because I think when you're young, you're probably a bit naive and ignorant. So failure was just not considered at all. It was how we are all going to go off to the sunset.
So, but how did the idea for the brand come about? 'Cause it's, in a sense, it's, it's exotic. It did change the market.
It was exhausting. And I think in between that conversation and startup, we did go on a fly drive to California on a holiday with our respective partners. And one thing we noticed was there was, obviously, we sort of came into Californian, Mexican, South American influenced food. And also, I used to work in Common Garden, and I used to go to a brand called Cafe Pacifico. I don't know if you remember.
Indeed,
It was
yeah.
yes, and it's where I got my first introduction to sort of bottles of Sol with limes on top and tequila belts and things like that. And I thought, gosh, this is quite good fun. And I could do that. I mean, I was about 26, so it was done purely for fun because I loved it.
I think that's a story which a lot of people have got in terms of how they get into the business. But obviously, it grew. You brought on investors. You brought on outside non-execs, and eventually sold. I mean, what are the learnings and advice you'd give for budding entrepreneurs, and what you learned out of Las Ig before we come on to Turtle Bay when you did it all again?
Yeah, I think I've learned quite a lot. I think we followed a lot of this advice from the beginning, which is, first thing is, if you're going to set up a business, make sure it is financially viable from the outset. In other words, do things properly. Make sure you have proper management accounts. Make sure you have good financial data, and so on and so forth. The second thing I've learned was finding the right people as a startup is incredibly difficult, because the people who want to join you are often risk takers, and they haven't got much to lose because they probably haven't got the experience. The ones who have got the ability are probably in established businesses. So choosing your people and nurturing them as a startup is part of a key skill, I feel. Certainly in hospitality businesses, the way we started, we didn't have big money to attract big hitting managers or area managers or finance people. So we had to bootstrap and do lots of things our way with relatively inexperienced people. But I think that is also part of the joy of a startup, in the sense that the expertise isn't there when you're starting, unless you have a massive pot of money and you put the team together first. So in Las Iguanas days, we just started by ourselves. Literally, we designed, painted our own restaurants, and away we went.
And the rest, they say, is history as well. But I suppose one of the other lessons is when you bring on investment into it. What did you learn from that?
What I learned from that was, when you bring investment, is not all money is equally valuable.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Just because somebody gives you £1 million or whatever the number, it's not even the contract, but the people who bring the money, the quality of the people, makes an awful lot of difference. What I mean by that is, some businesses might get the money they want at a cheaper rate, but end up with the wrong person in the business. So I've always sort of looked at the quality of the money, i.e., is the person giving me the money, are they knowledgeable in our sector? Are they the right kind of people I can work with? Do they have the right kind of skills to to contribute towards my own growth and the business's growth? And are these good people that we can, go through good times and hard times with? And those are the fundamental questions you get to ask when you're taking the money, because I don't think there is generally a shortage of money, especially now. So the quality of the money is a key decision that can only be judged by mixture of experience, instinct, that X factor that you will judge, because you could end up with lots of money, but with the wrong people.
I think there are a few stories like that around. Indeed.
A few stories around that, isn't it? I think some are unfolding right now.
We want to move on to Turtle Bay, but when Las Iguanas was sold, remind us, how big had it got? Because it really was, became a major player, and it still is a major player.
Yeah, I think we had about 35 or 40 sites, and we sold it in 2015. I think it went for £87 million then, which was, very good, lot of money. So it was a successful exit for everybody concerned. Everybody, whoever invested in Las Iguanas, made money. So I'm particularly proud that even under two different ownerships, I believe still that brand is trading incredibly well. So it goes to show it's sort of a iconic, or its economic model has lasted best part of 30 years. Can you believe that? It's unheard of restaurants to survive that long. So I think it's got a great team. It's got this adaptability. It's different to what's on the high street. It's the core values we set up as founders are still visible, certainly from an outside point of view. And it's a well-defined brand. And I think those brands can survive quite a long time.
So tell us about Turtle Bay. Why did you decide to do it all over again?
It is a funny story, but it is true. I was actually watching X Factor with my two daughters. At that time, they were, I don't know, 7, 8, something like that, on a sofa. And they were making me watch the X Factor. And Leona Lewis won the competition, and she was a mixed race Afro-Caribbean heritage girl who won it, and 22 million Brits voted for it. And at that moment, and this is a sort of entrepreneurial trait, apparently, that's what I've been told, I sort of saw this on my TV. And, those days, the TVs weren't flat screen. It's like a big box. I'm just trying to extend the time, give you the scale of time here. And I thought, gosh, no one's doing Afro-Caribbean food. And I then sort of went through my mind. I've been going to the Caribbean. My uncle was in Trinidad, as tourists and visitors. And I thought, then the more I started thinking about it, I thought, gosh, it's a great part of the world. And it's fusion cooking, it's fusion food, it's got great music, it's got great things, but no one's doing it. And then I went around eating and drinking in lots of mainly takeaways, in sort of a ethnically mixed areas, eating them. And I thought, I think I can do a good job up there. And that's what triggered it, really. And it never went off my mind. I used to wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh, that's a good idea.
And so you started again. Now, presumably, it wasn't quite as difficult or as traumatic launching Turtle Bay as it was Las Iguanas. One, because you've done it well. You had track record, and you had a reputation for success. So, how easy was it to get that off the ground?
It was a lot easier than the first time round. Firstly, when we did Las Iguanas, the investor pool for hospitality back in early 90s was quite limited. So it was regarded as proper high risk. By the time I came to do Turtle Bay, which was 2010-11, it was a mature industry with lots of money being thrown at it, and probably most of the high street brands backed up by investors of some sort, be it private investors or be it private equity. So there was a lot more. It was a lot easier to do, and the reputation and track record does help to do it. But having said that, trying to launch a new idea often, lots of people say no, it's a bad idea. So when I had the Caribbean idea, I went round and I spoke to handful of probably half a dozen, maybe 10 people, landlords, bankers, accountants, and others. Said, this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking about going again. Actually, the majority say, don't do it. Brits are not going to buy curry goat, but they don't understand jerk chicken. No one's buying rum because vodka's number one drink. Yeah. Reggae was from the 1970s. What are you doing? And in fact, one particular landlord, Peter, you're not going to believe it. I actually saw him, and he had a site somewhere in South. And he said, I'm really concerned if I give this site to a Caribbean restaurant, we might end up with hoodies and drugs and unsavory people. So this actually happened.
Yeah.
So the landlords weren't that helpful because it's a brand new company. It had no balance sheet. It had no track record. So eventually I had to buy the existing restaurant in Milton Keynes with a premium, and I converted that to a Turtle Bay. So there are difficulties, and one of the entrepreneur, since this series about entrepreneur, one of those traits is where when you come across a barrier, you try to find a different way of achieving your goals by going around the problem, really. And that's what we did. We bought a restaurant that wasn't working. It was an old dim tea in Milton Keynes.
And the rest is history. So, look, let's come back to some of the points you made there. But because certainly, how wrong were people about food taste and rum? Rum is the hottest, as it were. It's good. Hottest drink trend in the market at the moment. Yeah. But let's roll forward to, say, 2 years ago, just before the pandemic started. Remind us, how big had you managed to get Turtle Bay to up to that point, and prove those landlords wrong?
We had managed to get to 42 restaurants before the pandemic. Now, post-pandemic, we have 44 restaurants. And we reopened all the restaurants we had open before the pandemic. And so we're in an incredibly strong, good position, really.
And so as you say, you've got through the pandemic in a probably stronger position than most. So, but what did you learn through those times as well? Because everyone has had to adapt in one way or the other. But obviously, you've come through. No one's come through unscathed, but probably you're in a probably better position than some. But how did you adapt? What did you learn?
I think firstly, was to the way we operating had to change immediately. That was the first thing, or the way we managed the business. So, for instance, we started a much broader management meeting every Monday, every Wednesday, and every Friday at 9:00, and it was an open forum where everybody could bring problems, and so the hierarchy and line management was flattened. So if you're a HR person, you could come and say, "Look, I've got a problem here. What do I do?" For instance, or a property guy or whatever. And that created a real team spirit within the business, I felt. And it's perhaps something to remember going forward, how flat management within a business can really drive a pull together and drive forward. That was the first thing I've learned. Second thing I've learned was that we had to do even more for our people, because most of our staff are feeling insecure, vulnerable, and not knowing what to do. Some of them are having quite a lot of difficulties with mental health, financial help. So we had to respond to new sets of problems. For instance, we put aside money to make sure that everybody in our business was able to pay their rent and buy their food. And it was really well received by our people, because some people got caught between the various furlough conditions and landlords and things. That things weren't that smooth for some people, significant number of people. I'm talking about out of 1,500 people, maybe perhaps 80 people or more, needed some kind of individualized help. And we mobilized that. We mobilized more mental health care activities. And also, because we abandoned the traditional line hierarchy during that period, we were communicating more directly with our employees. In fact, we came to like a digital age. So I, as a founder and the CEO, would write to every single employee about whatever the issues, where we are going or when we're going to open, how we think we're going to come back. And I think my role was to become like the chief coordinator of the activities and keep hope alive and positivity alive within the business, that we are going to get through this. And the line I adapted during that period, which is actually a Caribbean line, storms don't last forever. So if you're from the Caribbean and you're getting these storms,
a nice optimistic line,
yeah, your roof might be blown away, but the storms don't last forever. We will rebuild again. We will move again. That was the message.
We're going to go back to the diversity issue, and I mean, you touched on it earlier, but before that, but also about your management, because obviously you've grown the business quite successfully to a large extent. You've got external investors in. You've got a chair in Jane O'Riordan, very experienced, and also you pulled away. You've given the day-to-day reins over to Nick Crossley, who's come in that sort of managing director role. How is that working? Because there you're the entrepreneur, the man with the idea. How has your role changed, and how's your relationship work with those two individuals?
I on the whole, I think it's a very productive one, because I think most of the work in terms of bringing the new team and making a success probably falls onto my lap, as it were. In other words, I don't mean I've got everything right, but generally, you have to accept the business need to go from an entrepreneurial stage into a management and more maturing stage. And that means different people need to lead the business. Different ways of working need to come in. The very things which makes us entrepreneurial people our advantage may necessarily be disadvantage. So with the pandemic and so on and so forth, it worked out very well that the next stage of the business should be in other people's hands in terms of everyday management. So I think that in that sense, it's been successful. Psychologically, I found it quite easy to do because I've done it before. There was a bit of uncertainty and bit of insecurity. Will they get what we're trying to do as well as I did? That is probably a bit of hubris behavior from me, but but they do, but it's just their approach is different to mine, and it's probably more appropriate for the business, which will probably end up doing, I don't know, 70-80 million pounds and maybe 12-13 million EBITDA. It's a different business with 2,000 people.
Yeah.
So it needs a different style of management. Nick Crossley brings a wealth of experience in terms of size of businesses he's run before. Jane has lots of experience in the corporate entrepreneurial kind of a background in terms of chairing or non-exec roles. Piper is a great support to the business. So I think it's in very good hands, really.
So let's look at the market itself. Let's look at where the next entrepreneurs are coming from. And dare I say it, there aren't many people with your background who have succeeded. Diversity is, we perhaps talk about diversity improving in hospitality, but probably at boardroom level, entrepreneur level, there's still a way to go. What can you do to help there? Does your experience help? What does the industry need to do to perhaps get a bit more diverse in the sort of people it's attracting?
This is a hard question, because I'm not sure an industry can do one thing in particular, but I think you need to become very aware that if the industry isn't relevant to the market it's serving, it will not attract the very best people. And even in the past, our sector has had difficulty attracting the very best, or rather retaining them. So I think the industry is a very enjoyable industry. It's a people business. It's a lot of fun, but it's also a lot of hard work. Pay isn't the best in the market. So therefore, you only got to offer warmth and support to your employees over and above any other employer, I believe, because we can't compete with Amazon wages or digital e-commerce wages or what have you. And I think the organizations need to reflect that diversity in Britain. And the Britain is becoming so diverse, and I recognized that when I started Turtle Bay 11 years ago, by having watched many years before Leona Lewis. And my point about Leona Lewis was that Britain had matured as a society where it's accepted its rainbow nationhood better than any other European country, or indeed in a more harmonious way than America has. So it was leading the way. And I think our industry does not reflect, certainly at senior management level, ops manager level and above, the diversity in gender or in race or any other areas. Now, I don't quite know what the reasons behind it are. I think one of my speculations is that people tend to mix and feel comfortable, it's a human nature, with those who are probably like us, if you understand what I mean. People like us in inverted commas. If that's the case, then you're only going to get the people like us in your business. You've got to go out of the way. There was a small rum brand, I won't mention it here, which is founded by, bright, Eton, educated young men, and they have gone out of their way to develop a policy where they want to see 50% of the candidates they get put forward for any particular position is from a diverse background. And these young men are in their 30s, and they come from a very privileged background. But I thought their aspiration and how they set the stall out was actually quite amazing, really, considering they come from this very niche part of our society. So I think perhaps that kind of dedication need to come into our sector, probably from the CEOs. It can't be a mantra just from your HR department, and also it probably need to be from the investors.
Indeed. Aj, thank you very much for sharing your experiences of the industry as it is today and your journey. It's been fascinating and inspiring as ever.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This
series of podcasts is sponsored by Bird & Bird and Zonal. The Peach Podcast is always free to listen to. And to find us, search Peach 2020, the Startup Hub, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or in any app that supports podcasts. And all of our podcasts will be uploaded to our YouTube channel too. Now don't forget to like, rate and subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of our future episodes.
Podcast from Peach 2020, hosted by Peter Martin.